Right on. All right. Finally, we're able to make it in. I
We
was
did
uh,
it.
I was trying to play cool suave dervish today, and wasn't able to pull this off with the technical difficulties.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're good. Hello, everyone. We are happy to be live and working here. Again, my name is Bala Bhaskar, and I'm the co-founder of Fullcast. I'm playing the role that Dharmesh usually plays on these chats. And we're going to talk to Tyler Simmons. Tyler works at Fullcast and heads up our customer success team. And he has been involved with the topic that we're going to talk about today, which is account hierarchy challenges and so on. And he's been involved with that topic for quite some time. We've worked on some epic projects related to account hierarchy and so on. So I think it'll be an interesting discussion. We're going to dive into the specifics of kind of some of the practical problems. I think there's the theoretical answer that most people kind of think about, and then there's the practical problems that we encounter in sales, which is mostly sort of exception driven, and there's always kind of a lot of these edge cases that come about as it relates to account hierarchy. So we want to dive into that and kind of look at why it's such a challenging topic, and why there is no sort of silver bullet answer to this topic. Otherwise, it would have been solved by now. So we're going to go into that. Tyler, before we jump in, do you want to do a quick introduction and just give the peeps an update on what you do, what your background, and so on?
Sure. So this will be a repeat for some of you that joined the last call, but so again, my name is Tyler. I head up the customer success team at Fullcast, and my background is pretty wide ranging, from an account manager to an account executive to managing SDR teams to being an SDR, and just have had a wide range of sales jobs. I was a real estate agent at one point, and anyway. Landed at Fullcast, been doing sales ops at Fullcast for the last 2-3 years now, and helping our customers out with a wide range of problems in either Salesforce or on the sales strategy side.
Cool. So let's get into the topic of account hierarchy or account families, as it may be known. But what we mean by that is a group of entities that are related to each other because of their relationship, either from a legal perspective, from an ownership perspective, or even from a relationship standpoint, and how you might want to think about a family or a group of accounts in the same way when you're thinking about segmentation, hierarchy, routing. Like there's everything that we do from a revenue operations perspective. So why is this topic hard? Like what from your perspective, what are some of the things? I know it's a broad, overarching sort of question, but what are some of the things that you've seen that makes this problem hard? Because when we talk to people, they say, "Well, I'm just going to go to a data provider like DMB, and they're going to give me the hierarchy, and life's good." But it doesn't quite turn out that way all the time. So we just wanted to sort of get your perspective on why you see this as a challenging topic, right? And what makes it challenging.
Well, I'd say the number one reason why it's so challenging is all of this stuff is dynamic. It is always changing. And it kind of comes back to we talked a lot about data in the last conversation, and it's really like keeping data up to date and clean. Like the companies are merging, companies are getting acquired, they're divesting, their information is updated constantly. And so you think about like these changes being so constant, it's very hard to keep that stuff up to date in the CRM. So I think that that's like one way to look at it. And another problem that you usually see arise is also inconsistent matching You'll have a lot of, this comes back to the data problem again, but like D&B, any of the other sources, Zoom Info, all of them out there rely on matching to data on in your account. And if that data is not there, then they're making a guess at matching, or they're even matching to the wrong account. So it depends, the wrong entity.
Right.
And if that's incorrect, then your hierarchies are going to be built incorrect because you're just matching the wrong data.
Right.
Some of the other things that like don't really pertain to data per se, but also cause issues is really like how you think about accounts, right? You could be selling to franchise locations or branch locations like the B of A down the street, and thinking about, well, do we sell to that? Do we not sell to that? Is a great question would be like, is it a sellable entity? So defining accounts, and if that definition isn't locked down and you have a lot of different accounts in your system that could be sellable entities and could not be sellable entities, that plays into that fact.
Right. And so the other sort of challenge that we always hear is that there are different types of relationships between entities in a corporate group, right? So obviously the clean definition is 51% ownership of an entity makes it part of the family in a sense, but then you encounter all kinds of other relationships, things like Coca-Cola and the bottling companies, right? And so from that standpoint, the bottling companies are not necessarily owned by Coca-Cola, but have a strong relationship in terms of the technology buying or some buying pattern that may be associated with that. Agencies like advertising agencies and car dealerships, these are all kind of interesting relationships. That the point you bring up about Bank of America is that, are these sellable entities? Are these things that we would sell to? And if we did sell to them, what is the relationship through which you sell? Is it an agency relationship? Is it a kind of dealership relationship, and so on? So while they may not be legally related, they could be related from the point of view of how you look at selling it, right? And that's I think the other challenge. The other great example is, I think, government, right? And the way that you organize government is not necessarily how the data providers would sort of give that to you. So that's an interesting challenge. Now, do you get down, when you talk about relationships like this, do you get down to like departmental levels, like to take a large corporation and you say, okay, I'm going to create an account within the CRM for different departments or divisions within a large corporation? How have you seen that tackled, or do you stop at the legal entity?
Both ways. It comes back to this. You're going to hear this question that you'll have to ask yourself a million times when you go through setting up some sort of account hierarchy policy: is how do we sell? Like, who do we sell to? Who is that? Like, and we've had customers that have sold to that department level. And Microsoft's a great example, between like Microsoft Office and the Xbox division and all the different divisions. And we created accounts for them, and they were in the Microsoft hierarchy because they sold to each of those departments or divisions. Right. A normal like SaaS business probably isn't going to sell into each of those departments because they're not like the main buying center, and they're not going to need to create accounts there and have them in the hierarchy, and they can have the one main Microsoft location or some of its subsidiaries as well.
Right. Now, you brought up an interesting point about buying centers, right? And I think that's another sort of dimension that people look at from an account hierarchy standpoint is, you may have a large bank, say Chase Bank or Bank of America, but the procurement centers for maybe IT services or the procurement center for HR services may actually be in specific locations. So it might not be at the headquarters, but it might be in other places, right? And so reorganizing the hierarchy to kind of support that buying center notion is another pattern that we've seen. And so I guess the reason for kind of calling out all of these different sort of scenarios is that it's not a slam dunk answer, right? You can't just go out there and buy the account hierarchy. You have to sort of adapt it to the way you sell and how you kind of reach out, right? And of course, what we've seen with our customers is that a lot of them simply have to maintain this manually and have to do this, kind of relationships in the CRM manually. And that is super painful. And it's super painful because obviously it's very volatile and you would make mistakes and things like that. So what is an approach to automation? Like how can we automate this sort of creation and maintenance of account hierarchy? And can you talk to some ideas around that? And obviously, shameless plug-in from a Fullcast perspective, we do have an automation that does this, but we want to hear from you in terms of what are some of the options that are available in a sense.
Yeah, the majority of people manually do this, right? Hey, can you link these two accounts together? Yep, I'll go in, click edit the parent ID field in Salesforce, find the right account, link them up. Usually when that becomes a real burden, everyone moves to the first step of automation maturity, I guess, or we'll make a maturity model for this. And that is really implementing some sort of like process builder or flow in which an account is edited or created and has core information that you can use to build a hierarchy, and then you go to find matches, right? There are a lot of inherent problems in keeping that hierarchy up to date. But that's like the first level of automation that gets put in place. And a lot of people go that route because then it offloads all that manual lookup. Right. Some of those problems that come up are like mergers and acquisitions, what happens when an account is deleted. There is a really big scenario where you have like multiple levels of hierarchies. And if you have the global ultimate, which is the topmost company, I use the term tippy top. So the company's at the tippy top. And then you've got a level here and then another level down, and that account exists, but you're still missing the one in the middle. If you use this half step of automation, they will always link up to account A, which is the global ultimate, even when you insert B. And it's important to think when you take the next step in maturity that you're going to need to actually, every time you insert an account or update an account that's in a corporate family, you actually need to completely blow up the entire hierarchy and rebuild it again. Right. Because it's got to get the right structure in place.
But why is not having the right structure a problem? Like, just to kind of reiterate the example that you were saying, right? So you might have a company that has a global headquarters, you might have regional headquarters, and then you might have subsidiaries or branches or something like that that rolls up under each regional headquarters. So if you don't have the regional headquarters account in your system, you will end up linking branches in Europe with the headquarters, right, account and
yep.
so on. And why is that a problem? Like, what's wrong with it? It's related to the account, it's related to the family, so we solved that problem. But why is not having the right hierarchy a challenge?
I'm going to try to think about that. So the real reason that you're going to care about this is, and the real reason you have hierarchies, right, is so that you can assign an entire corporate family to one strategic rep or an enterprise rep. Here, Mr. or Mrs. Enterprise Rep, you are going to work the Adobe corporate family, right? But in some cases, you might make a decision where the U.S. corporate family belongs to a U.S. strategic rep, and the Europe corporate family of the same thing belongs to a European rep. And if you have all of these accounts linking up to the global ultimate, whoever gets the global ultimate is probably going to get all of the accounts. So if you have the global ultimate in a mare, and all of these EMEA branches and subsidiaries are linked to the EMEA account, you're going to assign all those to the EMEA rep.
Right.
And the example I actually love to use is the Adobe one. So Adobe owns Marketo, and Marketo owns Tout App. Tout App is kind of part of Marketo now, but I still like to use the example because it's pretty clear. But if Adobe and Tout App is attached to Adobe, and let's say you didn't have Marketo in the system at the time, and so you've now got this hierarchy of Adobe and Tout App underneath. Marketo enters the system. Marketo links to Adobe, but Tout App, in your first maturity example, Tout App still stays linked to Adobe. So you assign Adobe to a strategic rep to handle, including all of its corporate subsidiaries. That's fine. But what happens when you want to break out Marketo and assign it to somebody that's based in San Jose, and you want them to work and go deep into Marketo, while Adobe belongs to somebody else? Well, when you assign that Marketo corporate family over to that person, guess where Tout App's going?
Right.
Not with Marketo. It's going with Adobe. And so that creates a problem, right? Like who works what, the data's inconsistent, so on and so forth.
Right. No, that's definitely the case. And we talked about some examples like, bottling companies, franchises, and scenarios like that. And in those kinds of situations, you almost have to create a custom definition, if you will, of a hierarchy, right? In the way that you are selling, because you're looking at, say you're selling to McDonald's and you're selling an IT solution to McDonald's. Every branch or every franchisee is not going to buy separately from you, right? You're going to sell to the corporate office and so on. So when you do that, of course, all of the franchise accounts, you don't want to treat them separately as separate entities in the system. You want to link them all to McDonald's and kind of create a family, even though legally they're not owned by McDonald's, right? And so that kind of hierarchical structure, we talked about the example with government, right? And typically most ways that you sell, you divide it by local, state, and federal. But that's not how the hierarchy shows up from most providers, right? And so you have to kind of custom create it. So when you do this custom sort of hierarchies that are sort of set up for the way that you sell, you would obviously have to do that manually. But is there automation that can be used for that purpose?
Sure, if you could.
Or is it all manual?
It's always manual. You can automate it if you can figure out how to, like, the core information to use to link it. Mm-hmm. And a great example would be, let's say they all have the same URL, same domain name. Yeah. You could use the domain name as a way to link all of these franchises, all of these locations up to a headquarter location. Right. Even though you go into DMB, you go into Zoom Info, whatever data source you have, and because they're based on the legal structure, they're not having them all linked together. They're all separate entities. And so you don't see them in the corporate family. Right. So that's one way to catch it.
Yeah. The other interesting example, of course, that we've seen, and this is, again, a challenge from a segmentation perspective as well, is mergers and acquisitions, right? Mergers and acquisitions can occur anytime during the year. And so from a segmentation perspective, let's say company A is acquiring company B, and you have them assigned to two different reps, right? And a merger occurs. There are a couple of challenges in terms of how to put that information into your system. The first one is an announced merger between two companies takes a whole bunch of time before it actually materializes, right? But companies want to start, getting discounts and family discounts, and the customers want to be treated a certain way, etc. So even though in the legal hierarchy things haven't settled yet because maybe the government hasn't approved it or whatever the case is, when you're selling to it, you might sell to it as a group, right? And so that's, I've seen custom policies kind of created for those kinds of scenarios. And the opposite of that is of course, even though a merger has occurred, like your Adobe and Marketo example, you might still want to treat them as two separate families, right? And assign. So in terms of your setup within the CRM, as well as how you think about segmentation, is it important to make sure that your segmentation is always reflected in the data, or could you have the hierarchy of Adobe, Marketo, Tout App in the system, but then your assignment rules are configurable enough that you can break them apart without having to have that be reflected in the hierarchy? Does that make sense? So
yeah, you would need full cast to do that.
No, but like, do you bring Marketo to the tippy top, or do you still keep the hierarchy? So from a reporting perspective, you have it, right? But from a segmentation perspective, you can think about it differently. I see, the reason why I bring it up is because I see a lot of people kind of merging the two ideas, right? And that causes problems from a reporting perspective as well as from a segmentation perspective. So just wanted to get your thoughts on where you've seen that being done correctly.
It's always good to have it all linked, to your point, because you have, from a reporting perspective, you can report on many different things, like what's the total ARR in this entire corporate family in Salesforce, or if you've got a BI tool and all that stuff. But you're right in like keeping that decision separate. So that's really going to be dependent on your go-to-market plan, and you're going to need to make a decision at that point. Well, do I want to for those strategic or enterprise accounts, do I want to just only bring over the corporate family for strategic and enterprise? Or if it's both of these accounts, like Adobe and Marketo are both enterprise level accounts, do we separate them? And that's a planning decision, and your planning tool should be able to accommodate the hierarchy within that and be able to break those apart and put them into the appropriate territories based on how you treat them.
Yeah, but you're
getting at, right? Like,
right, exactly.
It's a decision that needs to be made at the go-to-market planning time, right?
Yeah, and it's important to kind of separate these two things, right? Because if you merge them, then your reporting gets impacted, and it becomes a little bit more rigid, right? To work. Yeah, makes sense.
The decision that like really needs to be made is when you want to think about breaking up a corporate family in your CRM, not related to territories, or like thinking about things like holding companies and entities that sit at the top that aren't really entities that you would sell to, right. And you would actually want to report on things broken up. And the classic example is Berkshire Hathaway. They own a bunch of different accounts, and you probably don't want to see BNSF as a part of some other entity that Berkshire owns, right? And you would want to see those as two separate entities in your CRM as you are reporting on it. But that's the decision of like, do I break this hierarchy up or not? And it's not a planning decision in terms of pointing things to different territories.
Who's going to own the account and so on.
Exactly.
Right. And we talked about data sources. I know a lot of people ask us this question. What's the best data source to sort of get a starting point in terms of hierarchies, right? Provides that information, and how can we use that from a automation perspective, right? So, what are some of the different data sources, pros and cons that you have seen in the market today?
I would start with figuring out where you're selling. Are you selling in the US? Are you moving to selling globally? And finding a third-party data source that supports either just, if you're just selling in the US, find somebody that's really strong in the US. If you're going global, then find a source that is, it's got global coverage. The one question I would ask your third party data company is, do you have a hierarchy keys?
Right.
Do you have these IDs? So they all have IDs, and DMB, where you've heard it multiple times, DMB's got a 9-digit ID called the DUNS number, and they all relate to each other in terms of hierarchy. So the one account will have its own 9-digit ID, and its parent account will have, on that account, will have a 9-digit ID that points to another one in DMB's instance. So those are the two things I would start with. Where do we usually see customers go? I know that a lot of people that sell in the US have ZoomInfo, and ZoomInfo now has hierarchy keys that you can build hierarchical structures on. However, as soon as you see people go on a more global basis, they point more towards DMB. And really, the reason you would want to look really deep into that would be DMB has partner networks where, like, I can never remember the name of this company, but they're in Japan. It's like Tokyo, I think it's TSR something, Tokyo something research. It's a separate data company, but they plug in DMB or DUNS numbers into their data, so you can build one consistent corporate hierarchy.
Yeah. And we talking about data companies. We talked a little bit about the matching problem, right? Which is, how does the third-party data company identify an account in your CRM and link it to the specific entity that it might relate to in their database? So essentially matching what's in your database with what's in the data provider's database. Can you talk through kind of what that process is, why it fails quite often, and what are some of the challenges there?
So the reason that the process fails is just that you're having accounts being created with terrible data.
Yeah.
And a lot of these providers will match based on name, some country, and then one other piece of information, whether that's domain, like Clearbit, for example, matches on domain. I think ZoomInfo does the same thing. And DMB does like city, country, and name. Those are like core pieces of information. So let's say, for example, you don't have pick lists turned on in Salesforce, and you've got a weird name. You misspelled the word United States or the country name. It could match to the wrong account, or you're just straight up missing the domain. And so it's not going to match at all.
Right.
Or it's misspelled. And so those are the problems where you see like mismatching between your source and data that's in the account. And then once it's matched and it enriches your account, that account is very wrong. And then it'll just continue to make things worse in terms of building your hierarchy incorrectly. And it might not match to a global ultimate. It might match to a different corporate family because it's matched differently. So there's a lot of different situations there.
Yeah, and I think the other challenge with the matching logic as well is, sometimes you when you create these accounts, especially if you have automation that comes directly from like a lead form and conversion, and you're basically creating an account without filling in these basic pieces of information that's needed for matching, then what tends to happen is either the account is not matched and ends up in the wrong territory with the wrong rep because you don't know that this account belongs to a family, or it's linked to the wrong place in the hierarchy, right? Similar to the problem we were talking about earlier, where the American account can get linked to the headquarters or something like that, and that's based outside of Latin America, right? So those kinds of challenges, I think that makes it really hard to kind of build the automation based on that if the matching is not done correctly. And the matching is one of the main reasons why I see the automations kind of fail because of that. So how do you handle situations like that where the accounts are not linked, or ideally you want to put some kind of process in place to identify it and fix it. What are some of the things that you've seen that people use to sort of catch these exceptions and fix them in a timely manner?
Yeah, the best method that I've seen to date is a little system called Flag for Review. We made that name up, but it's essentially your reps are in the CRM day in and day out, and trust me, they're paying attention to this stuff. So when it's incorrect, they know about it.
Yeah.
And just giving them the simple option to click a button to flag the account for review, say review this hierarchy, will bring that to somebody's attention so that they can dig in and go, what's the problem here? Did it match incorrectly? Is the information incomplete? And it's manual. Like you're never gonna get away from just doing any manual work. It's never gonna be fully automated, but at least you're leveraging somebody out there seeing this stuff and kind of winnowing down into specifics, so you're not looking at all 400,000 accounts in your system to determine what's really the issue there.
Now, let's say that you've built out the hierarchy, you've gotten data source information, you've kind of set up the hierarchy, and obviously, as we talked about, things are volatile, and which means that the hierarchy itself is changing. There's mergers, acquisitions, et cetera, but you've assigned these accounts to segments already. And perhaps you don't want to change that around during the middle of the year, right? So let's say company A acquires company B, but you decide, no, I don't want to disturb the territory or the coverage that I have on those accounts, but you want to keep it the same way for the current fiscal year. So is it a good choice to, keep your segmentation intact in some cases? Or do you want to update that data right away and move the accounts? Like, how have you seen that play out, and what are some of the pitfalls that you've seen?
This comes back to the earlier conversation where we talk about conflating both the hierarchy and the CRM, right?
Coverage,
or your plan around segments. Right. I am of the opinion to update the data as soon as it's available.
Yeah.
That means update the corporate family, update whatever there is to update, just get it up to date in the CRM.
Yeah.
But the plan should stay in place unless you've made a policy decision around that being like an exception. Mergers and acquisitions, we will move this on a quarterly basis or whatever the thing is. And that's a conversation that sales ops and sales need to have around what is acceptable for us to update those, right? Everyone's policy on that's going to be different.
Right.
So this was a conversation to have, but that is something, once you have that policy in place, and let's say it's every quarter, you'll review mergers and acquisitions, which your CRM's already up to date with. So you can review those quickly and make decisions around, oh, this stuff needs to move to this rep, or this stuff actually needs to be split up,
right.
Whatever the changes need to be made.
Whatever the segmentation or territory rules are
Exactly.
So this again underscores the reason why it's important to separate the data about the hierarchy from the segmentation rules, right? You don't want to merge those two things together, because there are all these kind of use cases that start to break when you do that. Any other advice that you would give to folks that are looking to sort of get this account hierarchy problem in order, and what are some of the sort of successful things that people have done, other than, of course, automation and the tools that exist around this, but from a process, practice, policy perspective, what are some of the things that you've seen successfully done there?
Start by going back to the old, I don't know when the last one we did, it was maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, but go back, watch that one because we talked about building an account data policy.
Right.
That's the first place to start.
Yeah.
Get an idea of who you sell to and what needs to exist in the system. You need to get a grasp on how you're creating account data, how it's being enriched, etc. Just start there before you start automating anything else.
Yeah. So that's fundamentals, right? That's getting fundamentals. Yeah.
Yep. But fundamentals are important. I remember like back when I was playing baseball, like I'd sit there and hit 200-300 balls off a tee, right? Like, and it's the fundamentals are really important. But so you start with that policy. Then you need to make a decision around how you will build the hierarchies. How do you want those to look? That will be like, do we want holding companies to be included? Do we not want them to be included? Things like that, right? Then you go from there, and then you can build either your own automation. You could continue to do it manually, or you can look at other solutions like Fullcast to do it for you, right? And then that's kind of where you end in terms of just getting your data right in CRM. But the follow on to that is really, how do we use this hierarchy or these corporate families in our planning process? And that's a whole discussion that you'll have either every year or every quarter, however often you do your planning and figuring out where to put accounts.
And the other thing that I think you mentioned is having a process to deal with the mismatches, the exceptions, things that fall out, right? And having a way to have your reps identify those so you can actually go and fix them, right? Because
I think we talked about a flag for review thing in the last one too.
Okay.
So there's good information. I was pretty tactical in the last one, and there's pretty good information on it. And it's literally just like the reps click a button, say, hey, the employee information's wrong or hierarchy's wrong, and save. And that just has your data team take a look at it and figure out what's going on.
The other thing I want to call out also is that we have a white paper that I think goes into quite a bit of detail on all the stuff that I think we talked about, right? And people find that useful. So if you are watching this and you want to get a hold of that white paper, feel free to ping us. Just send an email to sales@fullcast.io and we'll have somebody get that white paper to you. It goes into quite a bit of detail on all the use cases that we kind of just talked about, and the automation that Fullcast has. It's
your classic white paper. It takes like 6 hours to get through because you keep thinking about other things. It's good though. I mean, it's dense, but it's good.
Yeah. If you're in need of a good read, and you enjoy that kind of thing, feel free to email us and we'll get those to you. Well, Tyler, I think we're at time, but I wanted to thank you for the time as an interesting kind of area that challenges a lot of sales ops organizations, right? And it's a common problem. There is no silver bullet answer. There's just proper structure and maturity that you can build, and automation that you can build to sort of deal with this. So appreciate you taking the time to walk us through it. Again, Tyler and I and Dharmesh, we're all available if you have any questions or anything like that you want to send us. More than happy to answer those and share some of the experiences that we've had dealing with this problem. Thank you so much, and I think that concludes our chat for today. Thank you, Tyler.
Great, thank you. See ya.
Take care.